Hello students. In our last class we discussed about the constructor, how it works. Today also we are going to discuss it in brief. What is that and how we are going to use it and what are the types of constructor are there. In Java, the constructor is a block of codes similar to the method. It is called when an instance of the class is created. At the time of constructor, memory of the object is allocated in the memory. It is a special type of method which is used to initialize the object. Every time an object is created using the new keyword and at least one constructor is called. It calls a default constructor. If there is no constructor available in the class, in such case, Java compiler provides a default constructor by default. There are two types of constructor in Java. No argument constructor, that is default constructor, and parameterized constructor. It is called constructor because it constructs the value at the time of object creation. It is not necessary to write a constructor for a class. It is because Java compiler creates a default constructor if class doesn't have any value. There are two rules defined for the constructor. Constructor name must be as same as its class name. A constructor must have no explicit return type. A constructor cannot be abstract, static, final, and synchronized. We can use access modifier while declaring a constructor. It controls the object creation. In other words, we can say that we have private, protected, public, or default constructor in Java. Now we will discuss about what are the types of Java constructor. We have two types of Java constructor, that is default constructor or no argument constructor, and second one is the parameterized constructor. What is Java default constructor? A constructor is called default constructor when it doesn't have any parameter. As you can see in the syntax as it is written, it is a default constructor which doesn't have any parameters in it. As you know that in this example we are creating the no argument constructor in a class, and at the time of object creation it can be invoked. I will tell you by using some examples later on. Remember that if there is no constructor in a class, compiler automatically creates a default constructor. Then the question arises, what is the purpose of a default constructor? The default constructor is used to provide the default values to the object like 0, null, etc. and depending upon the type. And now you are be able to create any constructor, so compiler provides you a default constructor when you are giving a value such as 0 and null. Then we will discuss about the parameterized constructor. A constructor which has a specific number of parameters is called parameterized constructor. Then the question arises, why we are using the parameterized constructor? The parameterized constructor is used to provide different values to distinct objects. However, we can provide the same values also. By giving examples, as you can see in the syntax, it is written the class name, that is the constructor name, and some parameters have been passed in this constructor by inside the curly braces. Inside the braces, we can create the constructor of any class having any parameters. Now we will discuss about the constructor overloading in Java. In Java, constructor is just like a method without return type. It can also be overloaded like Java methods. Constructor overloading in Java is a technique of having more than one constructor with different parameter lists. They are arranged in a way that each constructor performs a different task. They are differentiated by the compiler by the number of parameters in the list and their types. In later classes, we will discuss about how it is used in a program. Now we will discuss about the difference between the constructor and method in Java. As you know that there are many differences between constructor and methods. In Java constructor, a constructor is used to initialize the state of an object. But in Java method, a method is used to expose the behavior of an object. In Java constructor, a constructor must not have a return type. But in a Java method, a method must have a return type. In Java constructor, the constructor is invoked implicitly. But in the Java method, the method is invoked explicitly. In Java constructor, the Java compiler provides a default constructor if you don't have any constructor in a class. But in Java method, the method is not provided by the compiler in any case. In Java constructor, the constructor name must be same as the class name. But in method, the method name may or may not be same as the class name. Then we will discuss about the Java copy constructor. As you know that there is no copy constructor in Java. We can copy the values from one object to another like copy constructor in that C++ that we are using in that C++ language. There are many ways to copy the values of one object into another in Java. And they are 1. The first bit is by using constructor. Second, by assigning the values of one object into another. Third, by clone method of object classes. How we are copying values without constructor, without using a constructor. We can copy the values of one object into another by assigning the object's values to another object. In this case, there is no need to create a constructor. Then the question will be arising that the constructor does any constructor have a return value? Yes, it is the current class instance. That is, you cannot use return type, yet it returns a value. Then another question will be arising that constructor perform other tasks instead of initialization. Yes, like object creation, starting a thread, calling a method, you can perform any operations in the constructor as we can perform in the method. Then what is the purpose of constructor class? Java provides a constructor class which can be used to get the internal information of a constructor in the class. It is found in the java.lang.reflect package. Next. Now we will discuss about the access specifier and modifier and where they are used. Previously we discussed about how it is used in a class and where it can be accessed, but now we will discuss it in briefly. As you know that there are four types of Java access modifiers, that is public, private, protected and default. Default is the access specifier when we do not give any access specifier to any variable or to any method. Means if we are not going to declare any access specifier, then it will be called as default method or default variable. As the table shows where the access modifiers can be accessed, starting from the private. The private access modifier, when a variable is declared with private, when a variable is declared with when a method is declared with a private, then it can be accessed within a class, but within package it cannot be accessed. Outside the package by the subclass it cannot be accessed, and outside the package it cannot be accessed when we give private access modifier to any variable or method. When we come to default access modifier, we can access it within the class, within the package, but outside the package by the subclass, and outside the package we cannot be able to access it. When we come to protected access modifier, we can be able to access it within the class, within the package, outside the package but a subclass, and we cannot be able to access it outside any package. But when we declare a variable or a method with public access specifier or modifier, we can be able to access it within the class, within the package, outside the package, and outside the package by subclass. Everywhere we can be able to access it. Now we will discuss about what is access control. Access control is a mechanism, an attribute of encapsulation which restricts the access of certain member of a class to specific parts of a program. Here there is a program that demonstrates difference between public and private and how we can be able to call a variable by an object. Okay, see, as you can see that in this part there is a class name that is test. We have declared a class name test. Inside it we have declared INTA, which is a default access modifier. We have declared a variable INTB with public access specifier. We have declared a INTC variable with private access specifier. Then we declared a method that it set C to access the C variable which is private. Here we are passing a parameter that is INTI, where we are going to give the value, and thus this value will be stored in C, and through the getC function method we can be able to return that the value of the C. Now here we have declared class access test. It is a test, another class where